being a cycle breaker often means, you know, we carry the patterns of our families with us. So being a cycle breaker often means doing things differently than the people who came before you. And I do believe to some extent that most people try to do better than the generation before them. But when you're a cycle breaker, to actually break cycles, often you are having to call out dysfunction rather than go along with it. And that is particularly the case for people who are in narcissistic dysfunctional families, where the rules of the family are to keep the status quo at any cost, even if it makes you the villain or the problem child or, you know, the scapegoat, as I talk about. So it's a big risk, right? It's a big risk to start talking about the things that are wrong in your family. And this isn't, you know, I want to be clear, this isn't done with the intention of blaming. It's with the intention of accountability for change, right? If we don't speak about things, they can never change. So to be a cycle breaker means you are pulling back the veil, all the things that everyone has quietly accepted. You're saying like, hey, like that's not okay. Or like, why do we always do this? Or like, here you go doing that thing again. Like, why can't we do this differently? And that causes a lot of upheaval because the system wants to stay the same. It doesn't want change. And there can be a lot of players in the family, you know, and I would say this applies to other systems as well, like work situations too for a lot of people. But there can be a lot of players that are participating or colluding in the system staying the same. And depending on how rigid or dysfunctional your family system is, you know, sometimes we will see systems start to slowly adapt, even if it's just around the edges, or other family members start to do their own cycle breaking work among siblings. But often what can happen is that person who is trying to do their work, they get viewed in such a negative light in the family. And often I believe that is the case because it not only allows the system to stay the same, it allows the person or people who are participating in that to not take accountability and to not feel guilty also for the things that they may have done to you. So to be a cycle breaker is not for the faint-hearted by any means. It's not just your individual work. Like, individuals are connected to systems and families and other relationships. So it's like you pull one thread and it has an impact. So for anyone who is doing that work, like, you are doing some of the hardest work there really is.
I heard you say that when you started finding your voice in your family, it came with huge backlash. Can you tell us a little more about what that experience was like for you, and then how should anybody else going through that, or even just thinking about speaking up for the first time, prepare themselves for it?
Yeah. I wish this is something that more therapists talked with clients about. I think there's more movement now as so many of these topics are swirling around social media, but no one prepared me for that. All I was hearing, you know, whether it was in graduate school classes or in my own therapy at the time, was like a push to use your voice, set boundaries, be assertive, but nobody had warned me about what would happen when I started doing that. And for anyone who played the role in any relationship, whether it's your family, your romantic relationship, or your friendship, you know, that disrupts how things are, that disrupts how the relationship is. For me, I will share personally, having my husband come into my family, we were dating at the time, and kind of echo some of the feelings that I was having, was one of the primary supports that I had in really starting to use my voice. It sometimes is someone outside the system that comes in and sees it and is like, wait a second, like, what is this what we're really doing here? So that was certainly the case for me, and it did make it quite difficult on my relationship in the beginning, where I believe there was, you know, some negative light shed on me, my now husband. My system adapted a bit, but it wasn't without a lot of upheaval in different relationships in the family. I will say something that was freeing for me in that process was, at some point, I felt like there was sort of nothing I could do to change someone's opinion, like someone's mind had been made up, that almost allowed me, after a while, to unhook from the need for the approval and validation, where I just started to kind of live my life. And I know not everyone gets there quickly because, you know, our relationships are important. I come from a very close-knit family, as many who struggle with these things do. So for me, it wasn't a matter of like necessarily cutting out family members or distancing in any way, but allowing myself to be misunderstood is something that I continued to become more comfortable with. But I would say what happened in addition to that is certain relationships adjusted, and there was a lot of conversations that had to be had about unmet needs and the dynamics in relationships, especially with you know, a sibling, but friendships shifted as well, right? And I think this is what people in my office are coming and talking about a lot, whether it's romantic or friendship, is when they start finding their voice, if it's a person who benefited from you not having any needs, from you being small, from you being quiet, from you just doing whatever they wanted or going along with whatever they want or being their audience, that's a person that's not going to like you finding your voice. They're going to feel threatened by it in some way. And that's really tricky to navigate those relationships if it's someone you've had a long relationship with, someone you love, or a family member. So I think those are some of the most difficult parts about finding your voice. Like, on one hand, it's incredibly freeing and you feel connected to yourself, sometimes for the first time ever, but it does come with a lot of backlash often.